welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into a novel that almost everyone feels they know, but maybe don't know the full story of, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus.
Exactly. And our mission today really is to peel back, 200 years of movie monsters, the green skin, the neck bolts, all that.
Right, the whole pop culture image.
Yeah, and find the real story. Where did this book actually come from? Because it's rooted in this intense period of early 19th century science, some deep personal tragedy for Shelley, and also this really strong, maybe surprising connection to Scotland.
Mm-hmm. And for this, we looked at quite a range of things. There are historical accounts, detailing how the novel was actually written, contemporary reviews.
Including one crucial letter from Mary Shelley herself, setting the record straight.
Yes, exactly. And we also looked into the pretty gruesome real-world anatomy experiments that were happening then. Stuff that really fueled this whole era's fascination and maybe fear about life and death.
It's amazing, isn't it, how sometimes fiction can be almost like an early warning system for where science might be heading. It really makes you think why a book this old still matters so much.
It absolutely does. Okay, so let's start where most people know the story begins. That famous summer retreat in 1816.
Right, the Villa Diodati near Lake Geneva.
Yeah.
And the sources definitely confirm this was the year without a summer.
Which sounds dramatic, but it was real, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Caused by the massive volcanic eruption of Mount Tambora the year before, it basically created this volcanic, winter, cold, wet, miserable weather across Europe.
So you've got Mary Godwin at Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley, Lord Byron, John Polidori, all cooped up inside.
Pretty much, yeah. Forced indoors, reading German ghost stories out loud. Phantasmagoriana, that collection was called.
And then Byron has this idea, right? Let's all write a ghost story.
Exactly. And Mary, who was, only 18, she later wrote about feeling this blank incapability of invention. Like she just couldn't come up with anything, especially surrounded by these, big literary figures.
But it wasn't just the stories. It was the conversations they were having, too.
That seems to be the real key. They were talking about the big questions. What is life? Could we, reanimate something? Galvanism came up.
Okay, hold on. Galvanism. Let's quickly explain that for listeners. What exactly was that in, 1816?
Right. So galvanism, named after Luigi Galvani, it's basically about using electricity to make muscles contract. This was the cutting edge, maybe slightly creepy, science of the day.
So applying electric currents to dead things.
Yeah, dead animals, frogs, legs twitching, that kind of thing. And eventually, human bodies. People saw muscles spasm, limbs move, and the implication was pretty staggering. Could electricity actually restart life?
Okay, that context makes her famous waking dream so much more powerful. It wasn't just a random nightmare.
No, not at all. It came after these deep discussions. Sometime after midnight, someone actually calculated it probably happened between 2 and 3 a.m. on June 16th, 1816.
Wow, that's specific.
Apparently so. And she saw it vividly. This pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together.
The creature.
Yeah, this hideous phantasm of a man. And then, crucially, on the working of some powerful engine, it starts to show signs of life. It stirs with this uneasy, half-vital motion.
It's not just the creation, but the creator's horror at his creation. That immediate rejection.
Absolutely. And Percy Shelley apparently encouraged her, said, this is more than just a short story, you should expand it.
And she did, but under such difficult personal circumstances.
Oh, incredibly difficult. The sources point out she started writing the first proper chapters right after her half-sister, Fanny, had committed suicide.
Oh, yeah.
And she'd already lost her first baby shortly after birth. And her second child, William, who she was likely nursing while starting the novel, he also died before the book actually came out.
That's just layers of tragedy. So much death and grief surrounding her. It makes the novel's themes, creation, abandonment, the consequences of playing God feel so deeply personal, not just philosophical.
Definitely. You feel that weight. And, this actually brings us quite naturally to Scotland. It's woven into the book in ways people might not realize.
Right. We think Geneva, maybe Ingolstadt, where Victor studies, but Scotland looms large, too.
It really does. Mary Godwin spent a couple of really formative years there in Dundee from when she was about 14 to 16.
And she loved it there, didn't she?
She described it beautifully, called the shores of the River Tay her eyrie of freedom, a place where she could really connect with the creatures of my fancy. It was her imaginative escape.
So Scotland is a place of freedom and imagination for her personally.
Yeah.
But in the novel.
It takes on a darker role, yeah. Victor Frankenstein travels through Scotland, Edinburgh, Perth, St. Andrews are mentioned. But then he chooses the Orkney Islands, this remote, desolate place, for his next project.
Creating the female companion.
Right. And his description of Orkney is just bleak. He calls it hardly more than a rock, constantly battered by waves, a place fitted for such a work. It's like the creation process itself has become totally cut off from nature, from humanity.
But there's more to the Scottish connection than just the setting, isn't there? Something much darker, tied to the science of the time.
Yes, exactly. It links directly to this grim reality Mary was tapping into, the desperate shortage of legal bodies for anatomical study in the early 19th century.
Which led to
Resurrectionism, body snatching, grave robbing. It was a real terror.
And Scotland was a major center for anatomy schools, right? So the demand was high.
Huge demand. Edinburgh, Glasgow, they couldn't get enough corpses legally. And this desperation led to some truly macabre, almost theatrical events.
Like the Glasgow experiment.
Yes. This happened in November 1818, just months after Frankenstein was published. Professor Andrew Orr at Glasgow University got the body of a freshly hanged murderer, Matthew Clydesdale.
Okay.
And in front of an audience in a lecture room, he applied galvanic electrodes to the corpse.
What happened?
According to accounts, it was horrific. The chest started heaving, the eyes opened. Apparently, the body even lurched forward a few steps. People were terrified.
I can imagine. It sounds like something straight out of her novel. But real.
Completely. It was so shocking that the supervising physician, a Dr. James Jeffrey, actually had to intervene. He plunged a scalpel into the man's neck to stop the experiment, basically, as the account says, executing him a second time.
That's unbelievable. The desperation to understand, maybe even control life and death.
It really shows you the mindset. They weren't just dissecting, they were actively probing the boundary. Could they conquer death? It's Victor Frankenstein's ambition playing out for real.
And this whole gruesome trade in bodies, the body snatching, it had real legal consequences eventually.
Absolutely. The most infamous case, Burke and Hare in Edinburgh in 1828, they weren't even snatching bodies. They were murdering people, 16 victims, to sell the corpses to the anatomist Robert Knox.
That caused a massive public outcry, I assume.
Huge. And that outrage directly pushed Parliament to act. It led to the Anatomy Act of 1832.
And what did that do?
It finally provided a legal supply of bodies, unclaimed bodies, from workhouses, prisons. It essentially regulated the supply and effectively killed the illegal body snatching trade, the very trade that supplied the materials for Victor's creature.
So the novel wasn't just a Gothic fantasy. It was plugged right into these very real, very public anxieties about science, death, and the body.
Precisely. It captured this cultural moment of fear and fascination.
Okay, so let's talk about the book actually getting published.
Okay.
It comes out anonymously. January 1st, 1818. Mary's only 20.
Right. Percy Shelley wrote the preface,
Right.
and it was dedicated to her father, William Godwin. Anonymity was pretty common, especially for women writers trying to be taken seriously or just maintain respectability.
But anonymity can lead to confusion, right?
Yeah.
Especially when your husband is Percy Shelley, the famous poet.
Exactly, and that's where Sir Walter Scott comes in, probably the biggest literary name in Britain at the time.
He reviewed it.
He did in Blackwood's Edinburgh magazine, March 1818. And he loved it, praised its original genius, its forcible English, high praise. But he assumed the author was male. He kept referring to the writer as he, clearly thinking it was Percy's work.
Wow. So the most influential critic essentially credits her husband for her masterpiece.
Pretty much. He completely overlooked the possibility that a young woman could have written something so powerful and original. Mary had to correct him.
How did she handle that?
With remarkable tact. About 4 months later, she wrote him what's described as a very diplomatic letter.
What did it say?
She started by saying how pleased she was by his praise, his approbation of so high a value, buttering him up a little.
Smart.
Very. But then she gently corrected him. She wrote she was anxious to prevent your continuing in the mistake of supposing Mr. Shelley guilty of a juvenile attempt of mine.
Guilty of a juvenile attempt of mine? That phrasing is brilliant. It's modest, but also firmly claims ownership.
Exactly. She is the creator, not him. It's subtle but clear. Still, it took time for her name to actually get on the cover. The second edition in 1823 was the first to credit Mary Shelley.
But the version most of us read today is probably the 1831 edition, right? And that one's different.
Significantly different, yes. This was a later popular edition, and Mary revised it heavily. By this point, she'd been through so much more loss. Percy had died, more of her children.
So the revision reflects that.
Deeply, I think. The 1831 version makes Victor seem, well, maybe more flawed, more driven by a kind of understandable, if tragic, ambition. It frames the story much more as a cautionary tale filtered through her own experiences of grief and loss. Less about Enlightenment philosophy gone wrong, maybe more about personal tragedy.
Interesting. Did anything specific change besides the tone?
One notable change was removing the original epigraph from Milton's Paradise Lost.
Oh, what was the original quote?
It was Adam speaking to God. Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me?
Ah, so framing the creature like Adam, questioning his creation.
Precisely. It highlighted the creature's perspective, maybe his inherent innocence or right to question his maker. Taking that out in 1831 kind of shifts the focus more squarely onto Victor, his lone ambition, and his failure as a creator.
That's a subtle but really significant shift in focus. Okay, before we wrap up with the legacy, we have to tackle the biggest misconception, the one everyone gets wrong thanks to the movies.
The lightning bolt, with the massive jolt of electricity.
Right. It's not how the creature comes to life in the book, is it?
Not at all. Victor discovers some vague, elemental principle of life. We don't know exactly what. And then he spends 2 years, painstakingly assembling the creature.
From parts.
From parts gathered from the dissecting room in the slaughterhouse. It's slow, gruesome, methodical work, not one big dramatic zap.
The ambiguity of how is part of the horror, maybe. And the other big thing, the name.
Ah, yes. Frankenstein is the scientist, Victor Frankenstein. The creature has no name.
But everyone calls the monster Frankenstein.
Everyone. The sources show this confusion started early, even noted back in 1908, but it was really cemented by that 1931 James Whale movie with Boris Karloff. In the book, Victor just calls him wretch, fiend, demon, abhorred monster.
Names matter. Giving him no name is part of his tragedy, his otherness.
Absolutely. Yet, despite these misinterpretations, the core story remains so powerful. Guillermo del Toro called it the quintessential teenage book.
That's interesting. Why?
Because it captures that feeling of being an outsider, created, thrown into a world you don't understand, and then immediately judged and rejected. That resonates.
And interestingly, Scotland keeps popping up, even in modern takes. The latest Netflix film, for instance.
Yeah, they leaned heavily into Scotland for atmosphere and locations. The director and production designer specifically scouted places like Edinburgh's Royal Mile, Writer's Close. They wanted that Gothic feel Mary first experienced.
Did they film there too?
Some locations, yes. Gosford House stood in for the Frankenstein family home. Parts of Glasgow Cathedral were used. Even sets built elsewhere, like in Toronto, were inspired by Scottish architecture. The University of Glasgow cloisters, the Wallace Monument, apparently influenced some designs.
So that connection Mary felt to Scotland's atmosphere is still inspiring filmmakers today.
It seems so. The production team apparently really soaked up the mood, saying they left convinced Scotland is just full of ghosts and the Gothic. It provides that perfect backdrop for isolation and horror.
So wrapping this all up, our dive really shows Frankenstein is so much more than just, a scary monster story.
Definitely. It's a convergence of early 19th century science like galvanism, the real social horror of body snatching that led to the Anatomy Act, Mary Shelley's own profound grief, and her quiet fight for recognition as the author.
That correction letter to Walter Scott really sticks with you, the need to claim her own creation.
It does. And it brings us back to the creature's own plea to Victor. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam. He wants recognition from his creator. Mary Shelley had to fight for recognition as the creator from a powerful figure like Scott.
Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe, for you listening. When we encounter these great works, how often do we think about the author behind them? And how often might they have had to struggle against powerful voices trying to shape or even claim their story? It makes you wonder who gets to control the narrative, doesn't it?